All right. Hi, Patty.
Hi, Sam. How are you today?
Doing great. Nice to have you here.
Good to be here.
Good
And
morning.
and also we have Jules and Sumit. Sumit's good to see you. And I'm glad that you're back with
Good to
us.
see you as well.
Yeah.
And I think Nadia's already online, nice and early. Welcome, Nadia. Good to have you.
Hi, Nadia.
I'm always like in the attendees. I'm like, who's here? What names do I recognize? And I'm Snoopy.
Well, so anyway, as we wait, we're going to get started here at the top of the hour. So we're just going to chat and until we get there. But so how are things in India there, Sumit? Is it a hot time of year?
Hot and humid, yeah.
Yeah. It seems like that's almost a status quo, though. It's pretty like that most of the year, isn't it? Is that right?
By your standards, hot, yes. Because our definition of really cold winters is about the mid 50s.
Yeah. 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 That's yeah. So not so bad.
I'm
So,
all about that.
and Jules, you're dealing with a lot of fires in California and the Pacific Northwest right now, right?
I think, yeah, I've heard. I mean, I guess that's like, I feel like California every like few months there's a fire or so, but I'm not surprised. People have just been nonstop setting off fireworks everywhere. Like I don't know. It's just, yeah, it's been a little wild, a little bit loud over on my end. Yeah, people are still celebrating 4th of July, I guess.
Yeah, still.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's after being cooped up inside the house for a whole year. They just need to let those fireworks go all year long, right?
You're right. Everyone's just trying to, everyone's been like let out and they're just letting loose.
Here in Denver, if we set off fireworks, they're going to come and get us. It's like, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it scares all like the little animals, and I always feel bad for like the dogs that run away because they get scared, and so I like that. We need some Denver rules down here.
Yeah.
Well, they're just trying not to burn up the state, so I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
But I love some good fireworks. I mean, there's nothing like a good display on the 4th of July when you see all of those things up in the sky. It's kind of cool. Yeah.
So yeah, the one thing I bought it, well, it's just, I guess it's part of the experience. And fireworks in the city is when when they send them off and they go off and it creates a big bang, and then all the cars alarms go off everywhere. It's like it's almost part of the show.
Yeah.
So hey, Sumit, is there a period of time of the year where India uses fireworks to celebrate events?
Wedding season to a large extent, and also the Indian equivalent of Christmas, that's a festival called Diwali, usually happens in October or November. And that's when there's a crazy amount of fireworks all around. So there's lots, and for some reason in India, we seem to have a lot more of the noisy firecrackers rather than the ones that produce light. So it can be deafening.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So it's everywhere. It's a global thing.
A preference over the loud bangs versus the lights. I prefer the lights in the night sky. That's yeah. And they have such unique ones nowadays. I mean, just crazy patterns and stuff. So it's
But where we live on the 4th of July, there's fireworks in all the cities around us. I live very near the Morrison border, so but in Lakewood. And so Morrison has fireworks, Lakewood has fireworks, Littleton has fireworks, and then the city of Denver does. So we walk up to this big hill by our house, and we can sit there, and all we have to do is keep rotating, and we can see fireworks in every direction.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty darn cool. Although we were up there because it's actually a golf course, and all of a sudden the sprinkler system came off. We were like, oops.
Yeah. Bring some excitement to the excitement.
We were like,
right. Anything but boring, that's my life motto. That's awesome.
But it was cool. We thought this is amazing because you're really able to see so many different things, and all of them were awesome. So yeah, that's our 4th of July celebration, is to climb the hill, get a little wet, and watch the fireworks.
Sounds like a perfect way to do it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's
There's
great.
a bottle of wine involved there too, so.
Yeah, and there are other people up there as well. And
Yeah, kind of my entire, multiple families in our neighborhood, we kind of make it a little pilgrimage and go up there together and watch the shows.
no fun. That's a good community event.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, great. So we're just about to get started about a minute from now. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen here, and we can go ahead and kick things off. So can everybody see my screen? Or maybe not. I don't see it.
I can.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
you
can.
can? Okay, great. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. Jules, you want to kick things off for us?
Why not? We've just been talking about fireworks, so we're going to start this morning with a bang. Apparently, that's the direction we're going, right, guys? So, welcome everyone. So good to see so many of you here at the People Strategy Forum. And if you are new here, you've never hopped on, welcome. We always like to kind of chat with our guest speaker before we hop on, you know, just to get everyone situated. But now we're going to get into the meat of the presentation. And what we do here at the People Strategies Forum is it's actually, you can think of it like a mastermind. We bring different leaders, and our goal really is to help create workplaces where people thrive, employers reward, and customers love. So each and every week, there's a different guest speaker. We like to keep it really conversational and interactive. So please don't think that you have to just sit there listening to us. We want you to jump in with your questions and comments, throw them in the chat. And if you have questions and you're watching from a different platform, maybe you're watching from Facebook, for example, still be sure to write your questions in, because we will check for those and answer them right at the end. So don't worry, we will not forget about you if you're coming to us from somewhere else. To introduce myself, my name is Jules, and I help host the People Strategies Forum. I'm part of this amazing panel that you see on your screen here, and I'm going to be the one jumping in with your questions. So I'll be kind of more on the sidelines. But to introduce the rest of our panel, I don't think Shah's going to be joining us today, right, Sam?
No, she's not joining us today. She's actually moving her house. So she's moving into a beautiful new home. So she's busy getting ready for that.
Okay, that's fair enough. We'll let her off this time. But we normally have Shah here. We have Sumit here as well. He's an HR expert with over 16 years of experience working with large companies across the world, some of those including Accenture and Deloitte. He consults with many different companies. So we're happy to have Sumit here. We also have Sam, who is the founder and CEO of Comp Team, and Sam knows all the ins and outs of compensation. So if his company helps other companies implement fair, competitive compensation structures to just, you know, increase the happiness and culture.
Oh,
and we got the reminder we're being recorded. Thank you, Zoom. I guess that was the little segue into introducing our awesome guest speaker. I know you're going to love her because we're discussing the hybrid workplace today. So I want to introduce Pattie Money. And we actually were meant to have Pattie a few weeks ago, and then we had the power outage. So I'm so glad to have her back. So glad she could join us today. A little bit about Pattie. She has over 20 years of HR experience, and her expertise really lies in creating strong, healthy cultures that help not just organizational success, but individual success as well. She spent many years in the technology sector, and then she left corporate to create her own consulting firm, Pinnacle Leadership. So she is the owner and CEO of Pinnacle Leadership. And we're just excited to have you here, Pattie. I already love your energy and your vibe, and I know it's going to be a great conversation. So welcome.
Well, it's good to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so Pattie, as we get started here, and as a tradition of what we typically start off with, I would just love our audience to learn a little bit more about you. I mean, what was your journey into HR? How did you get started? And what kind of drove you to the passions that you have today as far as driving that, leading or advising leadership on how to do better?
Yeah, you know, I was not the traditional HR person. Many of us, I believe, fell into HR. I did. And I was a marketing major. I was going to be some ad exec in, New York or something. But anyway, I married my husband, and things did not go that way. So anyway, I started in recruiting and literally fell in love with HR. I moved from working in temporary staffing to leading a startup HR. And quite frankly, I was way over my skis, didn't really know what I was doing, but learned quickly the difference that doing people right makes in an organization. I mean, when we can create cultures and environments that people like to come to, like, it's like, oh, I like the people I work with. I like the managers. They make me better. They're fair. I work in a place that cares about me as a human being. I've always believed in the human touch of, human resources. I'm so thankful that we moved away from human resources in many companies to like people teams and stuff like that. Because really what we're doing is trying to create environments where people can thrive. We spend so much of our time at work. I mean, literally, when we think about our waking hours, we spend more time on our work than we do with our families. And so it should be rewarding. It should be fun. Like, I think work should be fun. If your work is not fun, then I think you're probably in the wrong job. So that's what really led me to spend my career in this area, and to really think about culture, to think about what are the drivers of really creating joy. We talk about engagement. I don't think you can do that if you don't like what you're doing and don't like the people you're doing it with. So that kind of led me down that path of really working with companies that care deeply about that stuff. And I also think whenever we enable others to do great work and actually have fun doing it, that we're happier. So, we become those multipliers when we're creating those cultures and helping other people be their best selves. So that's a little bit about my journey. I've worked in multiple industries. I worked in healthcare, manufacturing. After I was in manufacturing once, I was like, never again. And ran a nonprofit for a while. I fell into tech in 2000. And once I was in tech, I never looked back. So technology companies, high growth technology companies, has really been where I've found my ability, where I fit best, because I tend to be pretty darn informal. I don't like a lot of rules. I'm kind of a rules light HR person. So it's sort of like, okay, let's treat you like an adult. Let's not put a lot of rules in there. And you live like an adult and do your job, and it's going to be good. We're all going to treat each other with respect, et cetera. So technology really afforded me the opportunity to operate that way. And I spent the last 20 years in tech companies.
Yes, I mean, technology is one of my favorite sectors as well to work with. I mean, and a lot of our discussion today is centered around a lot of technology is really driving the way in that hybrid workforce, because as we know, a lot of technology workers are knowledge workers. They work on a computer. They can work anywhere in the world typically, and so that's really been a driving force of going into that hybrid environment. As well as, of course, the big factor that caused this big shift was the pandemic, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing about the technology companies outside the technology sector are also really embracing how do we do some level of hybrid, but technology companies are fueling that capability as well. We couldn't have done this without the tools that we have today that enable us to be able to work in this fashion. I mean, when I was first in the workforce, there was no way. I mean, heck, I know I'm old, but I didn't even have a cell phone, right? And so, and the idea of having video technology like this, was unheard of. So, I had to trot my rear into an office every day because that was the only way you could work. And so the possibilities have expanded so dramatically because of technology. So I think a lot of things have led us to this point. I actually think we were working hard to kind of figure out what's going to be the new way that we work. And then the pandemic just accelerated that. It was like pouring gasoline on this. And it was a forcing function for companies all over the world to figure this out. Before we were kind of figuring it out in drips and drabs, and then all of a sudden we're like, boom, we got to do this, and we got to keep our companies running, and we've got to continue to make money and keep people employed. And so, we had to do it fast. And there's a lot of lessons learned, I think, that are emerging from that.
Yeah. So let's dive into the details here. So how do we do hybrid right? I mean, what are the factors we need to think about, or companies need to think about to do this right?
Yeah, there's so much there that I think we have to think about. And, many times we think of hybrid as just being, where people work, when in fact, it's going to be a lot more than that. I think the first thing we have to give consideration to is the employee mindset. What we've learned, or what employees have learned over the pandemic time period, is like, they can do pretty darn good work at home, right? And most people, you think about our large cities where we have high concentrations of workers, people, traffic's horrible, right? Yeah. And so people are like, really, you want me to spend 2 hours of my life going back and forth in a car or a train or a subway or whatever, versus using that time more productively within my home? So I think the mindset of employees has shifted. There was a Mercer survey that they did that I thought was really telling, because when they ask people, how important post-pandemic is flexibility going to be to you? Like, how much are you going to care about this after we've got all these things behind us? 56% of the employees that they surveyed said it's going to be really, really important. And another 38% said it's somewhat important. So, you're looking at what? 94% of all the people surveyed that this is something that's going to be important to them to some degree moving forward. The other thing that's fascinating to me is that it used to be we as employers thought we're in the driver's seat here. Like, we were kind of like, okay, we're going to offer flexibility and some work from home programs and things like that. And we're thinking that we're doing really cool stuff here, right? Cutting edge, et cetera. And now, and employees, the people that work within our organizations, we're seeing it as a perk, right? It's like, okay, they offer this, that's a good thing. That could be a driving factor in terms of having somebody join and stay with your company. Okay. So that was mindset pre-pandemic. Post-pandemic, I think employees are going, what the heck? Yeah. I deserve to be able to work from home, or set my schedule, work anytime, any place, all that kind of stuff, because I've proven that it's not necessary to have butts in seats. Like, it's necessary for me to be able to do my job, to interact appropriately with my manager and my teammates, et cetera. But I don't really have to show up in a space every day in order to do really, really good work. Right. So, that mindset has shifted where employees now are in control there. Right.
But I think there's been an internal conflict in the mindset of employees, because I think after sitting at home and being isolated for quite some time, I think that they have that hunger to be able to collaborate with some of their colleagues. But at the same time, they're enjoying the flexibility, and they're imagining also how good it would be if I wasn't stuck in the home and all the restaurants out there weren't closed, and I would have the ability and freedom to go out to the store when I want to, go to a restaurant for lunch with my colleagues or my friends, and still be able to work do my work as necessary. So I think there's kind of that butting heads, that they still want to collaborate and they still want to have that flexibility, right?
So I could not agree more. So first of all, we as human beings love connection, right? Connection is so important, to feel like your teammates. I mean, I've talked to so many people. I've coached a couple of chief people officers who actually joined companies during the pandemic, never had met their teams, never had met even the executive team or the people team that, they were leading. And that's really hard, So I think people crave connection and want that. But I also think that at the same time, they don't want to be pigeonholed into saying, here's exactly how you have to make that connection work, right? You're going to want to have that connection. Many people want to spend time in the office. They actually have fantasies about what that's going to look like. But in most companies, it's going to look very different than it did pre-pandemic. So there's that idea of connection and desire, coupled with this whole thing that says, I also need to be able to do it in a way that works for me and my family and the life that I really want to lead.
Right.
So, and I do believe that companies that are responding to that are going to win in terms of talent because, people want those choices, and the companies that will give them to it will end up, in a much better position than those that are not doing that.
Right. Now, Sumit, I know that just from an India and other parts of the world perspective, I know that you still have a lot of professionals that are still kind of stuck in the home and are not able to work in the workplace. And so, are you seeing some of these trends develop as well in your experience?
So in fact, I was having a very interesting chat with a CHRO of a fairly large organization a couple of days back. And we were talking about their employer value proposition. And this person said, among other things, we even offer work from home as a perk. And that took me by surprise, and I nearly choked on my coffee. I like Pattie just did as well. And I was trying to explain to this gentleman that working from home is no longer a perk. It's a necessity if you want to get work done. So get over the old school mindset of you allowing an employee to work from wherever they want to. It's the need of the hour. It's the only way you can potentially run your business, by letting people work from where they want to. Stop micromanaging them. So one of the largest markets for all those keystroke mapping software that keep an eye on what people are doing on social media and whether they're really working or not, and your laptop taking selfies of you while you're working. So one of the largest markets is India. So I think we've still got a long way to go in this part of the world when it comes to trusting people, allowing them the flexibility to decide on their own work schedules, and just holding them accountable for results. So we still do measure people by the number of hours they spend at work, and it's a matter of great pride if you've been sending emails at 2 a.m. or at crazy hours of the night. And even in a recognition event, it's fairly common for people to say, this person works so hard, it's brilliant to have them on my team. I've got emails at 2 a.m. So many times from this person.
Wow.
So I think we're evolving, but we still do have a long way to go.
Yes, and I think that brings the way to the next topic of that people want to have more. They want to. It's not just where they work, but they want to have more control around how they work and so forth. So, can you tell us a little bit about that, Pattie?
Yeah, when we think about designing and doing hybrid right, one of the things that I think we focus a lot on is place, right? We're going, okay, where are you going to be working? When we think about all of the different things that have to be given consideration as you design a great hybrid experience, and one that serves both the organization and your workforce really, really well, boy, it's far beyond just place. It's time, it's like, when are you going to work? What are the hours? Even in environments where you have to come to work, the progressive companies are thinking a lot about, we've had very traditional shifts. There's the, 7 to 3, the 3 to 11, the 11 to 7, so there's been that very that mindset that we have to operate this way. And people are really challenging that assumption and thinking about, how do we schedule differently? How do we allow flexibility in the scheduling without being incredibly disruptive to what we need to get done? So they think a lot about, how do we use technology effectively in order to make certain people can collaborate well? What are the investments that we need to make? How do we really think about the structure of our workforce even? How do we think about alternative workforces? Do we need as many people full-time? Do we need more people that are going to be more gig economy workers that can help us during peak time periods? So I think when we think about it, we have to think about the when, the how, the what, the who, as we do really, really good design for hybrid. And once we've evaluated that and understood what works well within our organizations, then you can create this sort of menu that allows people to think about, okay, here's how I can actually structure my work, and this is what would work for me, and here's how I want to opt in or out. Because what we've also found is that there's many people that said, you know what, and especially if we want to talk about, the gender imbalance in terms of people exiting the workforce and saying, I've got to find a different way to work. There's a lot of women that have not come back in because they're looking for alternative ways to do work and to engage. So everything about, things like job sharing, things like reduce, having a larger part-time contingent of workers. So I think those are all the things that we as HR professionals have to be thinking through and determining, how would we make some of these things work in order for this to meet the needs of, the diverse workforces that are part of each and every one of our organizations. So I think it's more than the where. Right. We get hung up on the where, but you got to think about all the different options that are available in terms of designing how we work moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Those are some great points. Now I know that even we were talking about manufacturing earlier, right? Even in manufacturing environments during the height of the pandemic, they were forced to, if they were having continuing operations, they had people on the floor, they had to make sure that there was physical distancing. And as a result, what happened was they had to add more shifts, right, to get work done instead of having so many people on the floor at once. And so I think that almost developed a around the clock type of workplace for some organizations, which could carry on forward in giving people additional preferences of when they want to work and so forth. So I think that this is of course, when we're looking about, where they want to work and how they want to work and when they want to work and all these other factors, we can use this as a competitive advantage compared to our competitors by having more flexibility, right, around what we offer as an employer.
Yeah, and I think
So
go ahead.
Sorry. So an example just came to my mind, Sam, of exactly what you were saying. So in India, we've got some food manufacturing companies, and they've been hybrid for ages. So what they do is they employ a large number of gig workers and also permanent employees. And the idea is that they go to the office or to the company headquarters to pick up raw materials. They process it back at their homes with the regular health inspections and quality checks, etc. And then they bring in the finished products to back to the workplace for packaging and distribution. So that's as distributed as it gets. And they do have almost 100% women in the workforce because women really like the flexibility of, the way Indian society is structured, the woman is the primary caregiver for the family. And for most women, cooking, cleaning, and taking care of the house is an important responsibility. So it helps them in structuring their personal and professional lives. And although these are not conventional manufacturing jobs like, say, the automotive sector or machining kind of jobs, but it's one example of how companies are making hybrid work. And they've been doing it for the last 20 years or so.
Yeah, wow. I think one of the things I would add to that, Sam, I think that's an amazing example. And the fact that they've been doing that so successfully for so long just shows that when you're really intentional about what you're doing, you can make it work. So, I think we're at a time, like I keep saying this to everybody I'm talking with, it's like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for us to really redesign and be intentional about creating workspaces that are going to be adaptive and meet the needs of a very diverse workforce that we all need to attract. We all know, finding great people is really hard. So meeting them where they are and being intentional about what's going to work for your company versus, let's not set people up to fail is important. There's a few shifts that I think we have to keep in mind. Like we talked a little bit about the mindset that, the shift in employees' mindset shift, but we have to shift our own mindsets as well. Like we as leaders and as we design and think about what's going to work here, boy, our brains have to shift. We are shifting from where flexibility is actually like a perk to like it is a core strategic part of how we get work done. Like really having a hybrid flexible workforce is no longer, and that's got to get into our brains. Like this has got to be part of our strategic way of getting things done. Like we have to have managers that get out of their heads that they're managing based on time. I mean, the very thing you were talking about, Sumit, is people are managing how many hours versus saying, let's manage productivity. Let's manage deliverables. Let's say, here are your deliverables. We know when they should be done. We know what's reasonable and what's not reasonable. So we're going to make certain you deliver when you're supposed to. And we're going to manage around that versus around attendance or visibility or those things that have been so important from managers before. I also will mention that we have to shift how we think about our workspaces. Yeah. So a lot of times, we have been designing our workspaces around headcount, right? We say we have 2,225 bodies, and we have to have desks for all these people, and it needs to be arranged a certain way, et cetera. Yeah. And now I think we're really looking at workspace and work design, workspace to match and mirror what's the right work design. So that can mean like smaller satellite offices that allow people to go in and collaborate together. It could mean, hoteling where everybody doesn't have their own desk. There's so many different impacts that can have around how we design the places that we work as well. And that's a shift for all of us. Like we're all having to kind of get our brains into different spaces in order to embrace all of those opportunities that are in front of us. And it's a lot. I think there's a huge burden on, facilities and the people team, and also teams like security, which are having to think about how do we keep all of our data and things like that secure when people are working all over the place. Yep. Is it okay for them to work at Starbucks? I don't know, So I think we have to get in our brains all of these things that are shifts in terms of how we need to work moving forward. And once our brains are in the right mode, I think answers will start presenting themselves much more easily than when we're stuck in old ways of thinking.
That's right. I think that's a really good point. I listened to a podcast recently talking about the challenges around the new workplace of the future. Talking about a hub and spoke type methodology. I know that different companies are looking at modifying the office to be much smaller, be lighter weight, having a place that they can come in and interact and do things creatively, and but also have other the spoke element is having co-working places that are available and also working at home. And also at those public spaces that you mentioned. But in a conversation I had with Sumit earlier this week, we were talking about the security aspect around all this. And you just mentioned one point: is it appropriate to take certain calls and certain meetings? If you're in a public place like Starbucks and you're dealing with sensitive or competitive information, all these policies need to be put into place. And frankly, I think we've been too easy on managers in the past. You've mentioned these easy metrics such as time and attendance. Those are finite metrics. They're either here or they're not, or they got it done within this hour or they didn't. or they show up on time or whatever. I mean, those are so simple and are outdated that we need our managers to upskill and think about, okay, are they delivering the right quality? Are they servicing our clients right? Are these other things that are more soft and more elusive to measure is what I think we need to drive towards our future in this hybrid workforce. Would you agree?
I totally agree. And it's fascinating because managers generally, and I have my own biases here, so I'll just recognize them on the front end, but I think managers in general, they want us to make it easy, right? Okay, it's like, okay, give me a formula, give me a policy, because then I don't have to make decisions. I don't have to really think about this. Even in today's world, as we're moving into this, hybrid way of working, like managers love the idea of some of those tools that are like, how much screen time do you have? And, keystrokes and things like that. And, if your culture is one that says, we are a high trust culture, blah, 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 you're not going to want to do that. It's going to be very counterintuitive to the culture that you're trying to build. Yet managers are going, make my job easy, right? Mm-hmm. And, being a manager is hard. So yeah, I'll give them a lot of grace there. But, we have to help managers think about, how do you figure this out? Like, how do you know who your top performers are, even if they're not sitting next to you? We also have to think about, how are we fair in this regard too? So, because, one of the things that is really coming into play as we move into hybrid work is this environment of, does someone have an advantage if they're in the office? How much does visibility play into your career path and your ability to be promoted? Access to power. Like if your manager's in the office every day and you're not, but you've got a coworker that's there every day with them, is that person going to be their go-to person versus how do they engage with you? So there's a lot of things that from a manager perspective, we really have to help them be able to be fair, be able to measure performance in ways that are beyond just like how many hours and whether you're sending an email at 2:00 in the morning. It's a lot. Now, I don't think that it's really that different than it was before. Being a great manager, same things that made people great, pre-COVID are the same things that make managers great post-COVID. They just need a few more tools in order to be able to do that. Like they need to really understand, where is everybody? What is everybody's schedule? How is everybody working? How do I find ways to bring people together for collaboration that is not going to impede on people's personal work preferences and styles? So there's a lot that they have to juggle there with, a very distributed workforce with people that are, and when I say distributed, in the past, we've always thought about it just being people in different places. Now I'm thinking about they're distributed on multiple levels, yes, time and place and, all that kind of stuff. So, so I think managers being able to do this effectively is one of the areas where we have to spend the majority of our time as people leaders, to equip them, to help them do that, to understand that it's really not that different from what you were doing before, but now there's some nuances that you have to pay attention to, or you can fall into some traps that are going to be incredibly problematic. So, so a lot for people to think about.
Well, of course, every company is different, and every company is at a different stage of growth, and some of them have a host of undeveloped managers, and some have more senior, a bigger group of more developed managers that are more skilled and so forth. Some have different amount of digital technology that allow them to be successful remotely. So how do we do this diagnosis to see what our company needs and what are the best things that are required to make this successful in the future hybrid?
So do you mean in terms of management skill level?
No, I'm sorry, is how do we understand, how do we do a diagnosis on how to do hybrid right in a particular organization, in our organization that we're managing?
Yeah, so I think, again, you have to go back and really look at what are the drivers for success for the jobs, okay? And every job has different drivers for success. Some jobs, in order to be super successful, require collaboration, you know, very tight collaboration. Other jobs don't require that. You know, what is required is the ability for deep focus and a lack of interruptions and things like that. So I think as you start doing that diagnostics within your organization, you look at the job, first of all. So what are the jobs and what are the key components to success within those jobs as drivers for success? And if we make changes to the work and how that work is being done, what will be the impact to productivity and people's ability to be successful?
But are your clients, are they using polling and surveys to understand how their organization or their needs better?
Some people are, but again, I think on the job thing, most of the time they're doing like and looking at the job itself and saying, okay, for these types of jobs, you know, these are the key drivers for each one of those particular areas. There's a great article, I think it's called Getting Hybrid Right. That was a Harvard Business Review article that goes into some real depth in terms of what that looks like. But the diagnostics, first of all, I mean, you got to think about the jobs. You also have to think about employee preferences, okay? And that's where a lot of surveys are coming in, where companies are surveying their employees and gathering that data to understand and know, what do you really want, right? So what's going to be important to you as an individual versus, you know, what we as a company think is going to be right for you. Some of the horror stories, like I was talking to one company, and they literally, the managers went through and made decisions about which jobs could be hybrid or not. And they made a lot of mistakes, and they actually created a huge backlash of employee complaints, and, you know, the feeling that they were tone deaf and blind about how work actually needed to be done. So they had to go back and, you know, say they're sorry and start some redesign, and they kicked it off, and we kicked it off with an employee survey to really understand at an individual level what people are looking for.
So let's, Pattie, if we could dive into that just a little bit more, because I think that's a critical point that some of our listeners should understand, that, you know, if you bluntly saying this job can be hybrid, this job cannot. I mean, what can we dive in a little bit more? What are the problems that they found in doing that? What was specifically the backlash?
So first of all, there were jobs that definitely could be done remotely that were not designated as remote jobs. Okay. So, and it ended up being that a lot of because the managers were making the decisions. Yeah. So what was happening there? It was manager preference, right? Yes. So I think the big mistake was really saying, let's let managers decide which jobs can be what, because every manager is different and has different ideas about, you know, what works and what doesn't work, versus really being objective about the role itself. That's why evaluating it at the job level is super important. Because even let's just say you've got a job that requires a lot of collaboration. It still doesn't mean the person can't work remotely or have a different schedule, et cetera, but you have to figure out how do you build that collaboration into how they're working, right? So I think the big mistake was letting managers be in the driver's seat there, because employee preference counts today. Like, it used to be employee preference did not count nearly as much, but now it is one of the huge drivers for people staying in an organization. You know, am I going to be able to work the way that's right for me and my family and the lifestyle that I really want? Okay. Yes. If they're not able to do that, there are companies out there that make it very easy for that to happen. And so they're going to vote with their feet and leave those organizations and go to the ones that are more flexible. So,
which I think is a big crisis right now, right? I mean, we're seeing in some of these knowledge worker positions and technology companies and so forth, if you're not being flexible and you're making certain demands when you're asking people to come back into the workforce or into the office, you're right. People are voting with their feet. We're seeing that a lot right now.
Yeah, it's funny. Turnover across the board is up. I mean, part of me, I mean, I've seen turnover. There's turnover in some companies that I think are doing things really, really well, but their turnover is spiking. You know, my gut is that a lot of that is people are just poking their heads up after being, you know, going through COVID, and they're just tired and they think a fresh start would be good. So I think, you know, we as employers have got to take the time to really talk with employees about where they are, understand what's going to make them leave. Like, why would they leave? If they need a fresh start, what can we do to give them a fresh start within our organizations that it's going to make them feel good? It's not really on topic for hybrid, but again, if you're going to keep people, you're going to have those levels of conversation about what works for them, what do they need, and it's everywhere from, you know, job design to job content, et cetera. So again, we're seeing, I don't know about all the people on this call. I wish we could do a quick poll, but you know, most companies are experiencing a spike in turnover, and the amount of time it's taking to replace those roles is getting longer and longer.
So Jules, I mean, are we seeing anything on the chats? I mean, maybe perhaps we could, if people want to say that are on the call right now, if they're experiencing a greater amount of turnover, or if your clients are experiencing a greater amount of turnover at this particular time, let us know. What are you seeing, Jules?
Yeah, so actually it was kind of like similar, going off of what we were talking about like employee preference. So one of the questions was, as we're shifting our mindsets as employers, it's challenging to deal with the sense of entitlement that we're getting from some employees. So are there any thoughts on getting to a balance on that?
That's such a great question. Because I mean, Sam and I have known each other for a long time, and he knows my pet peeve is entitlement. Like, it just makes me a crazy woman. So I kind of feel the pain associated with this right now. And that's why I think it's important for us to evaluate carefully what will work within our environments. We don't have to say yes to everything, and people aren't entitled to us saying yes to everything. Now, they're entitled to go find a place that will say yes to what they need. Okay, so that's one of the problems that we have today, is that there's more and more companies that are going to be very, very flexible. But I think really understanding what's going to work within your organization, making those options available for your workforce. Sort of, this is your menu of things that can actually be productive and healthy and work for your specific culture and organization. And then you don't have to say yes to the things that don't work. And we shouldn't say yes to the things that don't work, because all we're going to do then is we're going to fail. People are going to fail. It's nothing good, you know, happens when we put people in a position that we know isn't right. I mean, we've all been there before, where you hire somebody and you think it's going to work. You're like, well, I think I can make it work. Never a good thing. Versus one where you think, this feels right. This is natural. So I think first of all, we shouldn't make employees feel like they're entitled to anything. I think we should let them know what they are entitled to, based on their role, based on your company and your culture. And then, you know, we all have things that are part of our employment kind of agreement, and we live into those things, but we don't have to go beyond what is not right for our organizations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we should be fair and consistent and in all those different areas. But then I know that there's some other elements as far as where we're talking about fairness and looking at different groups, and how does diversity and inclusion play into this and when we think about hybrid?
Yeah, I think it's a huge issue, number one. Mm-hmm. And I think managers are ill-equipped to be able to navigate this. So again, as we talked a little bit about earlier, there's this whole idea you can create, you know, differences in terms of haves and have-nots. When you think about haves and have-nots, a lot of times I think about it in terms of, your key sources of power. Like a lot of times when we think about how we gain power within organizations, many times it is the level of access that we have to both resources and to leadership. Who sees you doing great work, right? How do you get that level of visibility if you're not in the office or working side by side with your manager? So, we have to figure out how to make certain that there is visibility for people that are not in the office or working with their manager directly in order to be fair. Part of that is going to be really helping employees understand, how do you create visibility for yourself, right? Because it's not all of us, but we have to help and train people like, okay, you can't expect people to know what you're doing if you're not going to share it. Yeah. So how do you advocate for yourself? How do you share what you're doing? How do we as leaders give you forums for sharing the good work that you're doing as well? So how do we make certain that you've still got a good network? I mean, think about all the people that joined companies throughout the pandemic that never met their teams, that aren't well networked within the organization. I mean, some companies were doing a great job of creating those networks through remote manners, like, the company that one of the things we did in one of the companies I worked with is we literally said, okay, we need a team. Like, okay, it's not just you're going to have a buddy, but we need a team that is part of this person's network. And we need somebody that will be from some of these cross-functional areas, and we need somebody that is within their team, et cetera. So instead of just having a buddy, we created your onboarding team, and they became your informal network in a way for you to actually learn and understand how to navigate the company through different perspectives, right? Because it wasn't just within your team. So, helping people learn how to gain visibility, get the networks that are important for them and their success is going to be important. And then we also have to really think about managers and their biases. Okay. I've worked in technology for a long time, and there are many, many managers that believe the best way for, teams to work is co-located. Like that's where they're going to be their most creative and their most innovative and all that kind of good stuff. And so even though they've been drugged kicking and screaming into the hybrid world, and they're going to have employees that are not working in the office all the time, they still have bias here. So how do we actually think about ways to bust bias, to make certain that, they are evaluating people fairly and objectively? That's where, like, what are your objective measures of performance versus these ones that are about how long you work every day, are you sending an email at 2 o'clock in the morning, et cetera, will be super critical. So you have to, as you're designing hybrid, think about inclusion and fairness. And if you are not building that into your design, you're going to have a problem. And it's not, I'm not saying any of this stuff is easy, but it's where you have to get super intentional, and you have to recognize when things are not working that are creating barriers to those that are not working in the office every day to their success. We don't have a lot of data right now yet, because everybody's working from home, right? Yeah. But as we move into hybrid, we're going to have to really use data to understand what are the promotion rates for people that are working in a hybrid way versus people that are in the office all the time. Is there delta there? How are we going to figure out what the solutions are in those particular areas? Because if not, we're going to see a lot of people held back that shouldn't be.
So let's talk about ways of leveling the playing field out there. And so I was listening to a podcast. It was HR Superstars by 15.5, and they were talking about different elements here. They had Jennifer Christie, the CHRO of Twitter, was coming on, and of course they have a largely remote, if not entirely remote, workforce. And they were talking about different ways of having meetings, such as I think they call them one team meetings, where once a month they come together as an entire team and they share the results of different teams and so forth, so that they can showcase their work. They have the ability to interact with leaders and so forth. And so I think that's a great method. Another that the 15.5 mentioned is what they do is now when they have in the hybrid workforce, they have people that are in the office, people that are, in and out, and then of course those that are fully remote. And now they've kind of done away with the big TV screen in the conference room, right? And so everybody uses their own laptop, and that basically just levels the playing field across the board. Everybody's in the same little box, and they're still being having a collaborative discussion, but it's a way of creating the same similar feel. So what do you think about some of those? Do you have any other suggestions?
Well, again, I think everything we can do that is going to, number one, highlight good work is important. So creating forums that people can showcase work, really important. Even within existing teams, because if you're not seeing a teammate's work, you might not always know, how do I tap into that person's talents and abilities? Oh, I should be reaching out to them because they're really an expert in this particular area. And if you're not seeing those things showcased, you're going to miss something. One of the other things, and I think the idea, well, I don't know if most, but a lot of companies that I work with, they are definitely like all team meetings. Everybody comes in on their own laptop. It's not like they're meeting in the conference room, because the minute you're in the conference room, the people that are there, you have your side conversations, you have all of those things. And the people that are, in the box are struggling to actually participate effectively. Another thing that I think is really important is rotating times for team meetings, because somebody's going to be disadvantaged at some time. When you've got people working multiple schedules, it's kind of like, okay, it's always good. Somebody's going to be like, that's not a good time for me. Versus if you say, okay, we're going to do our team meetings. We're going to have, all hands every other week, but we're going to rotate for different times so that one person or two people aren't disadvantaged all the time, right? So if you have a rotating schedule, say, okay, on this week, it'll be at 9, the next week it'll be at 11, the next week it'll be at 1. So again, creating a rotating schedule that allows people to plan for it, number one, and number two, understand that they're not the only person that's having to make a sacrifice to attend the meeting at that point in time. That's been one that I think is really effective, because again, when you have people with different schedules, you can never accommodate everybody's schedule for your team meetings. I also think having good mentors, I think formal mentor programs are going to be critically important as we move into a more hybrid way of working with more senior level people, so that you feel like you've got access to leadership, someone that cares, it's going to be an advocate for you and help you on your journey. So I think I think that mentorship piece, especially for people that are not in the office all the time, is going to become more important.
Mm-hmm.
What else? I don't know. Siva, what do you think?
So that's a lot of great information to unpack and learn from, Pattie. In fact, on the inclusion and fairness aspect, I've got a few thoughts. So I was recently working with a client, and we were working on making the workplace a lot more inclusive for the LGBTQ community. And in India, there's a lot more stigma associated with sexual preferences and sexual identity, or gender identity rather.
Yeah.
So while I was interviewing people from the community for this project, a lot of them highlighted how they've started feeling psychologically unsafe in a hybrid environment because of the fact that we're a conservative society. Those people had opened up to folks at work, but their families were not aware of their coming out of the closet. So they felt more comfortable at the workplace than at home. Therefore, companies saying, no, you must work from home and everyone's got to work remotely was actually stopping them from delivering their best work. So this was a case of, it's natural to expect that people would be delighted with working from home. Also, there's a concept that's been going around called fake commuting. So a commute is where you bridge the gap between, so you switch off from your home and you switch your work hat on, and it's kind of the in limbo state. So there are people who've been creating fake commutes for themselves and just driving around the block for 10, 15 minutes to get that space between home and work in the morning and work and home in the evening. So that's that trend's catching on. And personally, I used to love my commute because it was 45 minutes one way, but I just switch on Audible, and traffic, people driving, you know how crazy the traffic is in India, didn't bother me at all. And I would just finish at least a book a week.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just start, when you're at an interesting point, you just start being grateful for those traffic jams, saying, yes, I can finish this chapter before I get home. So, I mean, jokes apart, I think there's a lot that has taken a hit in terms of inclusion. So there is data available globally which says employment rates of women have dipped everywhere. And so it's probably because we don't have the right policies. And I do see a question from Harold on what should be the top 2 HR policies as well, which should be reviewed by the CHRO. And I do think a lot of policies are made by men for men, and other genders get excluded, and we just tend to wear our own hats and say that. I think sitting in a conference room chatting with senior board members, these are the 2 or 3 things that will serve the workforce well, without really going to them and asking them what precisely do you need, and how can I as a leader cater to your individual requirements and needs to be more inclusive and fair to you.
Mm-hmm. Those are some great points, Sumit. Now, I just want to acknowledge it and put us on pause here for a moment because we are approaching the top of the hour. So I do need to acknowledge our sponsor here. And as you all know, that TMA has been a big sponsor of ours and keeping us going week after week. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about their tool here. This is a way for us to get to know our employees better, to get to know their preferences and so forth, as we've been discussing. And so there's a lot of ways that you can send out an assessment or a survey and understand what their preferences are, either from their innate talents and what type of work that they like to do, or how they do their best work, or any of those other things that we're talking about today, as far as their enablement at home or whatever it may be, as far as a survey. So lots of things here that the TMA method allows us to leverage, and then leverage as part of the overall integral talent management process. Also, I would like to tell you about our speaker next week. We have Elena Blenison, which is one of our longtime listeners, and so I'm so pleased that she's agreed to share her experience and knowledge with us. We're going to talk about taking care of employees with healthcare advocacy, and we're specifically talking about the information employers have and so forth that a lot of times, as people are where you have that aging workforce, that aging workforce may need some other people to help them get through or make those important decisions, or understand those different options of healthcare that an employer provides. So Elaine will take us through that journey next week. So join us then. So back to you, Jules. Do we have some questions that we haven't addressed that we can take up in our next few minutes here?
Yeah, I want because Harold has a question about, it's actually a 2-parter. So with hybrid work becoming a reality, what are 2 top HR policies that need to be reviewed by a CHRO? The first part. And similarly, what could be 2 top challenges that a CEO and his senior teams need to change in terms of leadership culture or practices that need to be reviewed and changed?
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, basically the 2 top HR policies that would need to be reviewed, and any challenges that you think a CEO and his team would, or her team would need to change in terms of leadership.
So I'm going to start with the second piece of that, if that's okay, because I think tone at the top is so critical. So whatever you've designed in terms of your work options, your your way of working, how you're going to be adaptive in terms of how you handle meetings, how all of those things. Your executive team has got to model all of those behaviors. So if people say we're all not going to get in a room together, we're going to all log into our screens and have equality here in terms of, access to the conversation, then the exec team has to do that as well. So it's like, what are you modeling? How do you make certain that people know that this is okay? Because if they don't see it, they don't believe it's actually available to them. So, so I think they have to model flexibility. They have to model working at different times. They have to model working with kids at home, and, which has happened during the pandemic. But I think, first of all, those leadership behaviors have got to model exactly what the company says it is embracing in terms of how people can, what their future of work actually looks like. So for me, that's number one. And I also think they have to model, communicate. You cannot do enough outreach, really understanding what's happening within your workforce, getting more data, more pulse surveys, and having executives really look at that data and act on them in ways that show people that they care. I think that's going to be critically important. From the Charo seat, I think it's hard for me to say what two policies, but I think really understanding the depth and breadth of the work that's been done to design the options that are available for your workforce, and to ensure that they're being applied fairly across teams. Now, again, the same rules don't have to apply to every team, but whatever's happening, you've got to, as the head of HR, make certain that they're fair and that they're consistent, and that you believe, like I would have to believe, that the right depth and breadth of analysis and understanding of what's going to work for our organization is in place before I blessed, okay, here's what we're finalizing, what we're going to put forth to our company. Now, I'll also say that it's okay for companies to take baby steps. Like, many times we think we have to design the perfect thing in order to have something happen. You can start with small pieces and say, we're going to test this. We're going to learn. We're going to run some experiments and see what happens, because people can appreciate the fact that we don't have all the answers at this point in time. So, so again, I don't think you have to create the perfect policy to start, but you have to create the right guardrails so people know what the options are. And then you as a charter are going to have to make certain that you are embracing that. One thing I wanted to share with everybody too, I'll just hold this up here, or it's called the Hybrid and Remote Work Playbook that was put out by Life Labs. So if we can put that in the chat for folks, it is a great thing and gives you a lot of different tips and tricks, and it's free. So you can download it, and and then there's a number of different articles that I think are awesome. Several from Harvard that popped out on making the hybrid workplace fair and getting hybrid right. Those are some excellent resources that we can access and learn from what other people are doing.
You mind dropping that link again, Patty, the website? So I'll go ahead and type it in the chat.
Well, I don't know that I have the website, but I'll send you the name of it, and then you can just Google it.
Sure. And then if anybody anybody out there has questions on that resource, just feel free to email us at sam@compteam.net, and I'll provide that resource for you. So we are at the top of the hour and out of time. So I want to thank you and thank everyone for joining us today. And a special thanks for Pattie Money for sharing her wisdom, and Sumit as well, and Jules. So thank you everyone for your help, and it was a great discussion, and look forward to seeing you next week. Right?
Thank you.
All right.
Great discussion. Great group. Thank you everyone for your comments, and yeah, we'll see you all next week.
Bye everyone.
Thank you everyone. Bye.